Hello, this is Justin Williams with the Wolfpacker. I'm joined by special guest today, Mike Rose. He is the defensive end for the Calgary Stampeders in the CFL, and you may know him as an NC State player from 2011 to 2014. So we welcome Mike Rose today to talk about NC State's 45-42 win over Wake Forest Saturday night in the season opener for the 2020 season. Before we dive too deep into the show, this podcast is brought to you in part by JFQ Lending. With interest rates below 3%, there has never been a better time to lock in a low fixed interest rate on your mortgage. You'll never need to think about refinancing again. Set it and forget it. And with JFQ Lending, you are guaranteed to get the highest level of customer service. They have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau and over 3,000 5-star reviews. Give Hunter Clausen a call today at 480-513-3992 or email Hunter directly at hclausen@jfqlending.com. That's HCLAUSSEN@jfqlending.com. JFQ Lending, Inc., Equal Access Lender, licensed in over 40 states, www.jfqlending.com. And while you're at it, be sure to take advantage of the special deal that we have going on at the wolfpacker.com right now. I believe today, September 20th, Sunday, is the last day you can take advantage of this deal. We've never had a deal this good. You can get a whole year of premium content, NC State athletic news and information for only $12 for your first year. So go over to the wolfpacker.com right now and use promo code NCST1241. That's NCST in all caps, 12, 4, no caps, 1. All right, so go over to the site. You'll get all the information there, and you can definitely be sure to sign up for that deal. But without further ado, Mike, thank you for joining us today. Obviously, NC State fans should be waking up this morning happy with a 1-0 record right out the gate. You know, coming off of a disappointing campaign in 2019 with a 4-8 record, not necessarily the identity that NC State football has taken on over the past couple decades here, particularly in recent years. So, Mike, just kind of your instant reaction to the game last night. It was a high-scoring affair, so something that's got to be a little bit frustrating for you as a defender.
Definitely. 42 points is never something that you want to see from any defense. But it was just good to watch football in general. That was my big thing, because I didn't know if we were going to have a college football season. So I was very excited to watch, especially state football in general. I really enjoyed it. The no fans in the stands was a different look for me. I've never seen Carter Finley empty, but, I definitely think they did enough to win. So I'll give them credit there.
It was certainly eerie to see an empty Carter Finley Stadium. Luckily, last second, the governor allowed for parents of the players to be allowed to be in attendance. Before that was, big controversy. They weren't going to be allowed to be in. There was a bunch of cutouts in there. I know Dave Doran's dog, Murphy, was in the stands and a lot of famous NC State celebrities there. So it was kind of cool to see, but that was definitely one thing I noticed because I was watching at home. My coworker, Matt, the editor of the wolfpacker.com, he had the credential because there was only one credential per publication. But watching it on ACC Network last night, it was just weird to see these big plays happen and then just silence. It was –
it's weird.
It's typically so easy to point out, the game-changing moments, but with no crowd noise, it was kind of harder to tell. But let's start with the good, Mike. Offensively, NC State looked really impressive under new offensive coordinator Tim Beck. There was a lot of question marks as to what kind of style he was going to bring in to NC State as a former coordinator at Nebraska, Ohio State, and Texas over the past 9 years, and has run a little bit of different things at each school, but definitely out of the gate in game one, he seems committed to running the football.
Oh, yeah. NC State apparently, again, has a stable of running backs. I really like the Ricky Person kid, the Zenova Knight kid. I really enjoyed watching them. But I think the offensive line, to me, they did very well. I think they got to the second level very well. You know, I didn't see too many sacks, only saw one, I believe. And the biggest thing is what I saw from Bailey Hochman is he's mobile while he can still throw it, and he's left-handed. So for defense, that changes the strong side of the field essentially. So he definitely brings a different element than what I'm used to. And after what I saw last year with the quarterback carousel, I would hope that that we get some consistency and hopefully Bailey sticks. But I mean, only Dave and his staff will be able to decide that.
Well, I want to get to Bailey Hochman because that was the big surprise entering the game yesterday. But NC State's running backs, Ricky Person, Zonovan Knight, and Jordan Houston all get double-digit carries yesterday. They combined for 251 yards together, 3 rushing touchdowns. Ricky Person even had a passing touchdown at one point in the game. So the running backs really led the offense last night in 49 rushing attempts compared to only 24 pass attempts. So right out of the gate, NC State seems to be running that offense through the run game with a 2-to-1 rush to pass ratio. Just as the game kind of evolved, Mike, how obvious was it that run game was just opening up everything on that Wake Forest defense?
I think that, I know from what I know from Coach D, he likes to run the ball, as a head coach. And I think that with young quarterbacks, it's good to run the ball because that opens up the play action game. That makes the game smoother and it takes the game out their hands a little bit because you don't want his first game coming out 40, 45 pass attempts, because then there's room for error. You can always work up to that because game plans change. But I think, his first game, 24 attempts is enough, and if you've got running backs who can handle the load and you got offensive linemen who can road grade, I'd run the ball down people's throats.
Well, it certainly was effective in game one, putting up 45 points. But let's talk about another benefactor of the run game last night. Someone that got involved in the run game is the Pac's 4th leading rusher, Bailey Hochman, the surprise starting quarterback last night. We found out, media, fans, everybody found out basically the same time, an hour before game time. However, post-game, it was revealed that Hochman learned, I believe it was a Monday or even before that he was going to be the starter in week 1. Of course, Devin Leary, the redshirt freshman or redshirt sophomore who started the final 5 games of 2019, was the assumed starter for the Wolfpack all offseason. And Dorn has been very consistent about citing Leary as the starting quarterback, but he ended up getting involved in a 20-day quarantine through the contact tracing protocols after NC State had that 8-day break there due to a coronavirus cluster. And so with that, Mike, what did you see from Hochman, and what do you think Dorn should do moving forward with this situation?
Hochman is very Jacoby-esque. If I can compare him to any quarterback that I've seen, he's a big, strong guy, decently mobile. So I think that the game plan should stay the same. I mean, just play action, keep it short. If you got to take a shot, take your shots when they're there. But for the most part, he has surprising mobility. So, in the red zone, and sometimes, throw it in there occasionally, 3rd and short. And, he's a young kid, so run him.
Well, he came out of the gate so hot. He completed his first 13 passes. It took him a quarter and a half to throw an incompletion. So he was really in the zone, and you could tell he was a little bit motivated by going the whole offseason, being that QB2 guy. Post game, he didn't hold back at all. He feels that he's the Pack starter. So it'll be a really interesting situation to follow moving forward. The one mistake that I saw from Hochman last night was that pick 6. Obviously, that was at completely the wrong time. NC State had an opportunity to really put the game away in the 3rd quarter, but instead, they're up 14. They had the ball. They were driving, and then Hochman throws the pick 6. Wake Forest comes back within 1 possession and then ends up tying the game, causing NC State to really need to pull it out late in the 4th quarter. But Hochman was 3 for 10 after his first 13 completions. So, got to watch for that confidence level after that pick 6. But what did you see from Hochman in response from that and from a coaching perspective, because it seems like they were really committed to the run game after that?
You got to do what's working. So I think early on he was hitting the completions. The tight ends was getting some love, But at the same time, defenses adjust. People adjust to what you're doing, And a lot of those short passes, Wake really said, all right, well, we'll take away the short game. We're going to force you to beat us. So when they did that, they said, all right, well, we'll pound the run game. So in a sense, I think that Hochman will have to evolve eventually. But I think for right now, I think he's good doing what he's doing. And I think that the new OC, he mixed it up enough to where, when the film comes out next week for the next opponent, they're going to have a lot to look at.
So 9 different receivers get 1 reception apiece. So everybody's getting involved. You got the 3 running backs getting involved in the pass game. You got 2 tight ends getting involved in the pass game, and then 4 different receivers with the starters and the freshman Porter Rooks, the former 4-star, getting involved as well. So as a defender, how hard is that to cover when so many guys are getting involved in playmaking?
Yeah, so usually when teams have a superstar, it's like, all right, we got to make sure he doesn't beat us. But when you play in a team that has a bunch of guys, not necessarily stars, but guys who could eventually be stars, but guys who are working their way, and everybody's getting a piece of the rock. So that means your defense might get a little bland because you can't hone in on one thing.
So let's transition to the defense, which, I feel that there were a few positives to take away, but to be really honest, probably more negative than positives to take away if you're putting up 42 points and getting six touchdowns on the board for Wake Forest. So just initial thoughts on the defense, and then we can kind of dive into the specific position groups from what you saw.
So to be fair, I'm not a big 3 down front guy.
Mm-hmm.
So I've never been a fan of a 3 down front. But what I saw that stood out, the good that I saw that stood out was State's flying to the ball. They're running to the ball. And the guys are trying, and they seem, energetic, and they seem emotional about it. Like they care. I could see from the film they care. There are some schematic things that I don't understand because I'm not in the room. But from what I saw, on the negative side, there was a lack of edge to the defense on the sense that, Kenneth Walker was getting outside whenever he wanted to. And to me, I feel like I've always played on defense where we had to set the edge. Me, Chubb, Art Norman, Cato Bishop, all the guys I play with, we always had to set the edge. And I didn't see that happening too much.
Yeah, that was definitely the number one thing that NC State's going to have to improve moving forward is that, just as you mentioned, I mean, it seemed like there were so many times that Walker was just stuffed, had nowhere to go, and then was able to bounce outside and pick up 10 yards. I think that was one of his touchdown runs for 30 yards where he bounced outside, and probably a good percentage, good chunk of his 130 yards last night. He finishes the night with 131 yards on 27 carries for a 4.9 average and 3 scores. So Wake Forest was pretty strong in the run game too. Luckily for the Pack, they were a little bit stronger at the end of the night. Let's start with the good on defense. I saw some good things out of the linebacker core. Peyton Wilson makes a couple, mental mistakes with a couple of personal fouls in the first half, but he was flying all over the field as he normally does. He's one of the most athletic guys on the field. Drake Thomas was impressive at times, really set the tone with a couple tackles for loss. And then Vi Jones was another guy that forces that big sack, almost a sack fumble recovery on that last second down and Wake Forest's final 2-minute drill. So what was your take on the linebackers, and who would you say stuck out the most in that unit?
I'm gonna go with Thomas. Is that 32, right?
Yeah. He's
he flies around, man. He's just a reckless linebacker. You like those, just a reckless guy, and he throws his body around for linebackers. And I think they definitely missed that Tanner Ingle kid. I think they definitely missed him out there. He definitely would have helped out. I mean, I would think the person who impressed me was two people who impressed me the most. Actually, Alan McNeil, however you say his
Aleem.
name.
Aleem.
Yeah, he's a big, strong kid, man, and that was a nice forced fumble he had and recovery at the same time. I definitely think he can grow into being a star. So, and then Daniel Joseph, 9'9", he moves very well for a guy his size.
So Liam McNeil, the junior nose tackle, was a former linebacker, but just an athletic freak. He was on Bruce Feldman's college football preseason freaks list. A guy that's on a lot of NFL mock draft boards as a mid round guy in 2021. So definitely one to watch out for. He's an athletic freak, and certainly I thought he had a pretty strong game out of the gate. That forced fumble and recovery came at exactly the right time because we all know Wake Forest could have easily strolled right down the field and taken the lead had that not happened in Wake Forest territory. And Daniel Joseph coming up big at the end with the big third down sack to really force a fourth, and I think it was like 18 or 20 for Wake Forest in their final prayer to maybe come back and do a game-winning drive. But Joseph leads the team in sacks yesterday with 2. He's the only guy with multiple yesterday. He's also finishes tied for second in tackles for loss, along with Aleem McNeil. I believe Peyton Wilson led the pack with 4 tackles for loss. But the secondary, you mentioned Tanner Ingle, a guy that's a third-team PFF All-ACC guy as an all-purpose defensive back. That's a big loss for him or for NC State in the backfield, in the secondary. But, hopefully he returns quickly because it definitely seemed apparent that there were some gaps in that secondary.
Yeah, I don't know for sure, but they look young. I think they just need to learn to mesh well because, just like anything, D linemen need to be able to work off each other and mesh together. DBs need to be able to mesh and trust each other. So I think that, by the mid-season, I think that they'll be more comfortable. They didn't look comfortable yet with each other, and maybe that's because Ingle's out. Maybe there's a little trust issue there, but I definitely think that they'll sort out the coverages eventually.
Well, it's a keen observation. It's definitely the youngest area for NC State on this defense, which is in general a very young defense. I mean, even the linebacker core, a lot of first and second year players there, or second year players really. But Rakeem Ashford was the guy that stepped in Tanner Ingle's place. He was a JUCO transfer in the last month. So, I mean, he's hardly had time to get into the fall camp. He transferred right before that there was even that 8-day break. So, really good observation there that, I mean, he's realistically had about 2 weeks of practice to really start meshing with this secondary. And hopefully for NC State fans, your prediction comes true in that unit will be a little bit more cohesive as the season goes along. But Mike, we're here Sunday afternoon, day after, and please, if you're listening to this podcast or watching this on YouTube, please be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, and also please be sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to this podcast. You definitely want to be sure to get these podcast episodes downloaded into your queue as they come along, because we're going to have at least 2 a week here as we move along in the football season. But Mike, I don't want to take up too much of your Sunday afternoon here. I know you're a busy man and you're still an active football player in the CFL, so I'm sure there's some training involved today. But your game ball of the 45-42 win over Wake Forest, who you got?
It's tough, but I'm going to give it to the O-line. I'm going to give it to the big dogs up front because you don't rush for 250 yards just playing around. So they meant business and they handled it.
I like the pick. I know the offensive line will appreciate the rare respect that they're given from us folks in the media. Of course, I mean, everybody that was interviewed on offense yesterday, Hochman and Ricky Person, both credited the offensive line heavily. The left side in particular of that offensive line with Tyrone Riley at left tackle. And Ikem Ekwonu at left guard. They call him Icky. And, man, he was delivering pancake blocks all evening long, opening up big gaps for those. I think NC State had like 20-plus yard runs, and that doesn't happen in a bubble. So I'm going to go with the more conventional pick for my game ball. I'm going to give it out to Ricky Person Jr. I'm personally surprised you didn't pick him because I felt he was, to me, I mean, I don't know how much you've been keeping track of the offseason stories, but Ricky Person's a guy that struggled with injuries in his first 2 seasons. He's one of the highest touted recruits at NC State right now. He was a 4-star coming out of high school. He was a Rivals top 100 guy. Only one other Rivals top 100 guy on this roster. It's Vi Jones at outside linebacker. But Ricky Person, 3 touchdowns, 2 on the ground, 1 through the air. He did a little bit of everything. He averaged 7.1 yards per carry, had a couple receptions as well. So Ricky looked as good as he's ever been at NC State. I mean, Wolfpack fans will know from watching him over the past 2 seasons that he's shown flashes, but, has missed a big chunk of those games. And that takes a mental toll. As a player, I mean, I don't know how much personal experience you have with recovering from injuries, but I mean, before we sign off here, could you just speak a little bit to kind of the mental aspect of overcoming injuries and being held out of the game that you love?
Now that you say that, I'm thinking about it. I feel like at this point, all these kids would have played, 2-3 games by now. And I feel like they're all going through something mentally right now, especially with COVID. They're probably taking online class. So I think they're all having to struggle with stuff like that. I think the only thing that happened to me in college, I broke my wrist twice, and I had a hip labrum tear after my junior year. So I spent the whole offseason just getting ready for training camp. And my first live reps were really in training camp my senior year. But that turned out to be my best season. So, when it comes down to it, it just depends on how you handle adversity in that situation, because you could always just, get lazy and just say, forget it, I always got next season, but no season's guaranteed. So you always got to go hard.
Well, Mike, thank you for joining us this afternoon. It's been great hearing your thoughts on the NC State victory to start the season. If you want to give him a follow on Twitter, please be sure to give him a follow at SavageMike90. That's at SavageMike90. He's a good follow, so be sure to support our Pack Pro with Mr. Mike Rose. If you want to follow me personally, it's at Justin H. Will. That's at Justin H. Will. And be sure to follow our account at the Wolfpacker if you haven't already. You can give us a like on Facebook. Again, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel at the Wolfpacker, and be sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to this podcast. And lastly, please do yourself a favor and take advantage of the flash sale that we have going on. It expires today. Use promo code NCST12FOR1 on thewolfpacker.com. You get $12, a special rate for 1 year of premium NC State athletics content, so you don't want to miss out on that. And Mike, thank you again so much. For Mike Rose, this is Justin Williams, and this has been the Wolfpacker Postgame Podcast.